Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show. With me, your friendly neighborhood jeweler, Alon and Joseph. Today, I'm very honored and proud to welcome to the virtual studio Mike France, one of the co-founders of British watchmaker Christopher Ward. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Alon. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here for the first time, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you're extremely busy. So let's get the banter out of the way. How much agony did you have with such a surname growing up in the UK?
Strangely, it garners more curiosity as I cross into other countries, particularly France. Everybody at border control, I end up having a conversation with, and often tell them that my roots are Huguenot roots. So that's always of interest to people. But growing up, not so much really. There were a few Englands in one of my classes as I grew up. So that was a nice sort of England against France in the playground playing football. So that was always good.
Yeah, that's interesting because one of our co-hosts, David Vaucher, is obviously French, and he's so proud of the French watchmaking getting revived. So we always make jokes about the French. So, okay, we got that out of the way. Mike, please introduce us. I can do it, but you are so multi-pronged, so omnipresent. You do so much. And also for British watchmakers, because Christopher Ward is, if I'm not mistaken, 2 decades old as a brand.
That's right, yeah.
Besides that, I love English and British watches. I like British women because my wife is English. And I've been almost dating her. And she's my wife now for 2 decades. So the first time I've ever discovered Christopher Ward was when I was commuting up and down to London. In the in-flight magazines, I saw Christopher Ward and I'm like, wow, cool brand. And I've been following you guys ever since. And ever since you launched the Bel Canto, I'm in love.
With your wife or with us?
I can still admit that I'm in love with her. And it doesn't matter if I do or don't say it on air because she doesn't listen to the show. But with her as well. But with you guys. And then I met Adrian Buchman and all the bits and pieces fell together. And you guys came out with some wave making models recently. I want to talk about that. But
Sure.
the most interesting thing I want to discuss is you guys were from day one a D2C brand. What do I mean by that? A direct to consumer. So please tell me a bit about yourself and why Christopher Ward was founded and why was it immediately a direct to consumer brand? Because you guys were super innovative to do this.
Sure. I think at least we tell people, and I think we're accurate. We were the first online only sort of premium watch brand. So the business was actually founded in May of 2004, and our first watches went on sale in June 2005. And my background is pretty straightforward, really. I'm a retail lifer and worked for a number of blue chip retail organizations in the UK, including places like Sears, Arcadia, BHS. And then in the mid-90s, my fellow Christopher Ward co-founder, Peter Ellis, and I ended up, our company was running the Early Learning Centre, which for those of your listeners who don't know was a large educational toys business based in the UK, but with branches all around the world. And it had got itself into a spot of trouble, and my company and I were parachuted into to help return it to health, which I'm pleased to say we did. We bought it along the way and then sold it in 2004. As I've said on a number of occasions, you can only spend so much time on the beach. And after a month, I was getting particularly itchy and wanted to do something else. Watches was of interest, because we kind of liked watches, but also because one of the criteria we had is we wanted to, from the beginning, develop a online-only brand. And the reason for that, in answer to your question, Alon, is during our time at Early Learning Centre, we were a very early adopter of online business. And although having sort of 400, 500 stores worldwide at the time, In 1997, we launched an online website for Early Learning Centre. Again, I think we're the first or second toy business in the world to do it. And it proved extremely successful. And if you can sell climbing frames online, we thought you could probably sell anything. And, having spent a career in bricks and mortar, we also felt that, online business was likely to be the growing trend and where the future growth was going to come from. So we opted for a different business model to that which existed, went online only, positioned ourselves so that we could take advantage of the low overhead that this offered us, which we passed on to the customer in low prices from the very start. Not low quality, but low prices. The rest is sort of history. I mean, people literally rang me up in 04, 05 to say, look, what you're doing, this is not going to work. You are not possible. It's not possible to sell a watch, a quality watch online. People will always want to have it on their wrist first before they commit. But as I say, we'd been selling items like climbing frames previously, and so we felt that whilst there would be some resistance from some people, that this would be overcome over time. And I'm pleased to say that that's through more luck than good judgment. Probably that's what's happened subsequently. So that's the sort of roots of the business.
A lot of people think that Christopher Ward is just a made-up marketing label, which unfortunately we have too many of them in the watchmaking industry. But Christopher Ward actually exists, right?
He is a real person. No, Chris and I went back a long way. He was one of the three original founders of the business, and he had a small importing. He'd worked for me in the past, going back to the very early '80s when I was a buyer of boys and menswear, and then became a womenswear buying controller. And Chris had worked for me, and always was an interesting chap. We lost touch for a number of years. Then through Early Learning Centre, we discovered each other again. He was not really interested in developing the business he owned at that time. And when I suggested to him that perhaps he might like to join Peter and I in creating a watch brand, he was up for that. And the first discussions actually took place on his boat on the Thames, sailing at 6 knots, no more than 6 knots down the Thames. We plotted to overthrow the entire Swiss watch industry. This was after one or two beers had been drunk, it must be said. And the original plan was that Peter and I would put all the money in, which we did, and take sort of non-executive type roles, and Chris would do all the work. It quickly became obvious that that wasn't quite the way it was going to work out, and so increasingly over the years, we became more and more involved until by about 2010, we were sort of doing most of the work. Meanwhile, that famous sort of route that all new businesses and brands go through, the naming of the brand had to be discussed. And initially it was going to be called MPC, Mike, Pete and Chris, but that sounded a little too like IWC, we thought. And then we considered using my wife's maiden name, which is Fennell, and Peter's wife's maiden name, which is Worswick. By the way, Worswick is a famous old clockmaker in Cumbria in the UK. But Fennell and Worswick sounds like something out of a Dickens novel, and might be very good for vintage watches, but not for the contemporary watches we wanted to deliver. So almost in desperation, I said, look, we want it to be real. We want it to have a nice cadence. For an English brand to call itself Michael France probably isn't quite appropriate. Peter Ellis is a bit mundane. Christopher Ward, on the other hand, has a very nice cadence and rhythm to it. And it was real and true. So we that's how the name evolved, came into fruition. It's a very proud day for Chris as well. So we were delighted that we really resisted these made-up names that you refer to. We wanted this to be a genuine brand and a genuine company name.
And I think you've done a great job at it, because when studying your website, and for our dear listeners, you can find Christopher Ward under the name as you hear.com. So ChristopherWard.com. You'll find Jörg Bader Sr. And I've had lovely calls with Jörg Bader Jr. Who are these lovely chaps?
So, they're very important members of our team. Jörg Senior is now a shareholder in the business, and the story behind that is very originally the business plan was to develop watches entirely in the Far East, but using Swiss-made movements. And around about 2000 and end of 2006 into 2007, we were largely using ETA movements, and at that time, the Swatch Group, for good reason, I think, they were very concerned about fake watches using real Swiss movements. They decided not to provide any Swiss-made versions of, particularly the ETA at the time 2824 that we were using, into Switzerland, into the Far East. And so we had a choice at that point. It was one of these sort of apocryphal moments when we could either continue to make everything in the Far East and therefore change to movements that were made in the Far East, or including maybe moving to movements such as Mayotte, or we could move our glance towards Switzerland and find manufacturers in Switzerland that we could work with. And we decided to take the latter route rather than the former. We believed that, and still do today believe that, Swiss-made is a sort of a important benchmark for people, and still today it stands for all the things that we know and love about watches. It doesn't mean that other countries aren't capable of making fantastic watches, and we know that's obviously not the case. You only have to look at Seiko, Grand Seiko, etc., to understand that's not true. But nevertheless, Switzerland stands for something in most people's mind's eye. So we moved to Switzerland. When I say we moved to Switzerland, we just got in a car, drove to Switzerland, knew nobody, didn't have a clue, and just went and talked to people. Made appointments at factories, and then discovered an operator who had access to Swiss movements, Swiss ETA movements, because one of the things we discovered early on is that wasn't as easy as we thought it might be. You had to have there was a quota system, and we didn't have any history, therefore we didn't have a quota. We found somebody who did have a quota. So we started operating with this Swiss manufacturer, but discovered, as I've discovered all the way through my career, because I've been involved in the manufacture and the selling and marketing of many products over the course of a lifetime. And one of the truisms that you discover is a country is variable. There are good and bad manufacturers in every single country, and that includes Switzerland, and it includes Swiss watch manufacturers. And I won't name the company, but the company we were working with, the quality of what they were producing was so far below what we would accept that we decided fairly early on that we would move our gaze elsewhere. And so we were then very fortunate to come across a company called Synergy Horloger, which Jörg Bader Senior had set up. And we moved, he shared, I think he was a bit shocked by the model that we had, because nobody had really come across the sort of model we had before, but he was really enticed by it. He felt that the watch industry was due some sort of shake up and change, and he himself had been trying to do that in his own company, but through a different route, more traditional distribution. We pitch up with this, at the time, unique model with a view that said we wanted to offer top quality, but only at a multiple of times 3 versus the average in the industry that's many times higher than that. And he was fascinated. And so we moved all of our production to Synergy Horloger. We ended up working incredibly closely with them. And in 2014, we were peas out of the same pod and decided to literally merge as one company. So Christopher Ward became Christopher Ward London and Christopher Ward CH under Christopher Ward Holdings. And almost simultaneously, we'd been working with Jorg and his master watchmaker at the time, a chap called Johannes Janker, who you may be familiar with. Johannes had developed with us the Caliber SH21, which we again launched in 2014. This was a 120-hour power reserve movement chronometer. We delivered into a rather unsuspecting world on July the 4th, Independence Day 2014. And that movement is still with us and is in the next 12 months or so, we'll move into the 2.0 version. So, and Jorg at 2014 became a shareholder with Peter and I. And then to bring things right up to date, we brought in 2019 a minority shareholder, BGF, Business Growth Fund, who own about a quarter of the business, because we wanted, until that point, all of the money that had gone into the business had been mine and Peter's and a bit from Jorg, and we wanted to invest in parts of the infrastructure that needed investment so we could take the business and the brand to the next level. So we brought BGF in, and they remain our partners to this day.
So it's lovely to hear that you guys grew into Switzerland. The Swiss side of things is a family run and owned business. Now I have a very handsome chap connected to me on LinkedIn called Peter Franz.
Yeah.
Do you know him?
He's my nephew.
Okay, so does he still work at Christopher Ward?
Yes, he does. He's the new business manager for our bespoke side.
So we could say, literally on all sides of the pond, it's a family business.
I think it's good. I mean, we had interestingly, we had an away day with the teams from both Switzerland and the UK last week. And one of the things that we were talking about was the culture of the business. And one of the things that really came through was how people feel, despite the fact that we're growing rapidly, that there is a family feel to this business. And one of the challenges that we're faced with as we continue to grow is how we retain that, because it's sometimes very easy to lose sight of the things that matter most. And so this sort of camaraderie and caring for each other, which you get in most families, not all, it should be said, I hope is evident here, and the teams themselves seem to think it is. So yes, it's fair to say there is a real family feel, and both spiritually and in reality to the business.
That's lovely to hear. So where do you see Christopher Ward going? Where do you see it in a decade time? You guys are moving up market, but keeping pricing reasonable. And I would underline that and concur, because although you're making more of high-end pieces, which I'm referring to the Belcanto, for example, where do you guys see yourself going as a company, as a brand?
We have pretty big ambitions. From day one, the mission was always to put premium watches on the wrists of as many people as possible. And to achieve that mission, you've got to be sizable. Literally, I want to walk down the center aisle of a plane and see people wearing Christopher Ward watches on their wrists and enjoying the experience. So we see ourselves growing very significantly. Probably in the next 3 to 4 years, we will get close to trebling the size of the business. Today, our biggest market is the United States. And we are growing exponentially in that market. And of course, it's a very large market. And since the Bel Canto, which I think it's fair to say was a transformational watch for the brand in many ways, we've definitely acquired many, many new customers and people interested in the brand in places like the Far East, to the point that Singapore, as you will know, Alon, is a major centre for watch collectors. Singapore was the third largest market for the Bel Canto, for instance, which was a slight surprise to us. It's a pretty big world. It's a pretty big market that we're fortunate to operate in. I mean, by various accounts, it's depending on which report you read on which day, but it's anything between 35 and 50 billion sterling equivalent. And you don't need to have a very large share of that market to have a pretty big business. And I've always believed that the Chris Ford brand is a pretty large watch brand waiting to break out. I'm also a fan of, I don't know if you're aware of Jim Collins, Stanford educated business guru who wrote a very, very well regarded book on business back about 2 decades ago, not long before we formed Christopher Ward, in fact, called Good to Great. I don't know if you've come across it, but he interestingly did a lot of research. He had more than 50 Stanford graduates working in his team, collating information about what made Fortune 500 companies sustainably significantly more profitable than the average over a longer period of time. And this research led to a number of companies that had delivered on average some 7 times the profits of the average Fortune 500 companies over sort of 20 to 25 years. And he tried to distill what the component parts of those companies were that had led to this sustained success and growth. And one of the things that is fascinating that he discovered, they may not all have described this in the same way, but he distilled it into the flywheel principle. In other words, if you continually try and do the right stuff and that you continually focus on the product that you're delivering and the service that you're providing those companies, and good product has to be at the core of any good company. If you keep doing the right things over a period of time and you're reasonably smart, so in life, I think the best you can do is hope to make more good decisions than bad decisions. So if you are making more good decisions than bad decisions in your business, then you're essentially nudging a flywheel. And every time you put your shoulders to the flywheel, at the start of that process, the flywheel moves a small way, and the next nudge, it moves another small way. But eventually, the momentum of these consistent nudges gets the flywheel to start spinning. And in many ways, although I've been reading Collins since 2000, that flywheel principle is coming true at the moment for Christopher Ward. I think by and large, whilst we've not made all correct decisions over the 20 years, my goodness, I wish we had, but there's no way we have. I think in general, we've made more good decisions than poor decisions. And we've always been focused on product, design, and quality. And because of that, and the team that have worked tirelessly to produce those products and get them to the customers, backed by profoundly good customer service and a genuine desire to put the customer first, we've been nudging that flywheel. And bit by bit, every year we've grown, sometimes 5%, sometimes 30%. But now, with the introduction of certainly the Bel Canto, followed 6 months later by the 12, the flywheel is really beginning to spin. So ultimately, I can see this brand and this business being $250 million and more. And the next 3 to 4 years will see us make significant progress towards that level. So this is, again, as I say, down to the hard work and the brilliance of some of the people I have been very fortunate to work with in this business, and not to mention a dose of good luck along the way. If you can't be good, be lucky. And we've fortunately been lucky in lots of ways as well.
Would you switch or pivot the model by incorporating, for example, retailers or any other business model? Do you sell on other platforms, or does 100% of the business come through ChristopherWard.com?
100% comes through ChristopherWard.com, apart from we have a showroom here in Maidenhead, and people by appointment only visit that showroom and can buy. We have no wholesale model and have no intention at this stage of having a wholesale model. There's a very good reason for that. We don't, as you will know, Alon, I mean, you're a retailer as well. I mean, you have to have built into your pricing architecture, if you're going down the wholesale route, enough margin for the retailer. That's a perfectly valid way of operating, and it's the way the watch industry has largely operated for its entire history. The problem with it for a brand that wants to find a different place in the market, and we always wanted to have a different place, because these days, I think if you're not offering something different, it's going to be very hard in a very crowded market. And let's be honest, the premium and luxury watch industry is a very crowded market. Unless you're offering something different, I think there's a real ceiling to your growth potential. And so by having this very simple business model where we multiply the cost price of everything we sell by 3 times to get to the selling price, that means that there isn't any margin there for a third party. And so the chances of us having a third party are zero in that sense in the mix, because it would fundamentally alter our business model. That doesn't mean to say, however, that in time, I don't see us having other routes under the Christopher Ward name to the market. So the showroom we have here in Maidenhead is extremely successful. I mean, as I've been in retail all my professional life, and I think we probably have the highest density, i.e. sales per square foot, of any retail space in the UK. And therefore, do I see a potential, maybe, for us having similar showrooms that would not be on major high streets across the world? So, would we, the UK, would we ever consider having a site on Regent Street and paying $2.5 million in rent alone? No. Would I think that we could have 3 or 4 showrooms around London in tertiary locations with very low rent, where people by appointment could have a real showroom experience, the like of which we offer them here? Yeah, I don't discount that at all. And do I think that could internationally travel? Yes, I do. So major urban centres potentially would be of interest. But I'm also a big believer, and the business is a big believer, in focus. It's very easy to get carried away. And so whilst we may go into these arenas, and from time to time we do a piece of work to acquaint ourselves with what the possibilities might be, right now the growth we have online across various parts of the world is of such a scale that we don't need to do that, and we need to make sure that we service this growth online in the best possible way. So right now, and for the near future, the model remains as is. What it looks like in 5 years' time, I think, is an interesting thought.
Regarding the part of being a family-owned and run business, you said, if I understood correctly, that there are external investors that have a quarter of the business.
Yeah.
I didn't understand if they're private equity or venture capitalists, but
they're they're patient. They prefer to be called patient capital.
That's good. That's good, because the downside of venture capital, private equity is lifetime cycles of 5 to 7 years. And my question is, and that's what I'm leading up to, is how important is independence for Christopher Ward as a company? And do you think you'll stay independent, or is that the mission?
Independence to this point has been extremely important to us, and I don't see that changing for a considerable time. I mean, the real point of bringing anybody on board is only to, as far as I'm concerned, is only to allow you to achieve your business goals. And at the time, as I say, back in 2019, we wanted to develop some significant infrastructures that would support the growth from there up to the sort of levels that I've been talking about. And so there was a considerable amount of capital that we wanted to invest in specific arenas, which we could have scraped together ourselves, but we felt it was going to be interesting to bring these guys on board. As I say, they're a minority shareholder, and they have long-term views of their investments. For instance, whilst they have a position on the board, as you'd expect, that we don't have an external chairman because they're very confident. I mean, Peter and I have been involved in private equity for too long, maybe 30 years now, and so they know, and we know we're pretty well known in that world. And we've been reasonably successful in the past. So they've come in as not silent partners as such, but as a help. If in the future we decided that there was a need for huge external funds that the business cash flows could not support themselves, then if it was the right thing for the business, then we would consider additional capital coming in. But it has to be what does the business require? Is it strategically a move that we want to make? And can we afford it or not from our current cash flows? At the moment, we have very good cash flows. As you will know, cash is what really matters at the end of the day. And in the next several years, I see absolutely no barriers to us remaining independent and achieving the growth plans that we have. But who knows in 3, 5, 10 years time what else happens? I'm not going to be here on this mortal coil, in 25, 30 years time. So there will be changes afoot. The important thing for us is we're trying to build. As I said, one of the reasons I'm really interested in things like Jim Collins and sustainably profitable businesses is there is, I think, one of the mores of society these days is for quick flips, for quick wins, for people making quick bucks. That's the antithesis of what we are about and have always been about. And what we're trying to do is put down really rooted foundations into this business and this brand that go way beyond our tenure and involvement in it, so that it is a brand of the ages, as it were. And we're a long way from that. But there are some pretty solid things already in place, and I think increasingly so. That's the aim. And if we're going to achieve 100 million, 250 million turnover, you don't do that without having solid foundations.
Would you see yourself becoming a little group by launching an additional brand, maybe?
No, and I say that only because, again, I believe in focus. We don't need to do it. Whatever you do, it can be successful, and there are many examples of it being successful. But I want us completely and utterly focused on the development and success of the Christopher Ward brand. And if you if you create a separate brand, it has a completely different life force. It requires its own identity. It requires its own character. And it's for us right now, that would be a huge distraction. We are completely and utterly devoted to this brand. That's not going to change, certainly not while I'm around.
It's actually lovely to hear, because if I have to summarize everything I heard up until now, it's a legacy brand. It seems like it's a legacy project for the initial 3 founders. You've proven it by not selling out, literally. Family, younger generations coming in, laser focused on strategy and execution. So it's actually very rare in today's economy, because you just explained it's all about quick bucks and quick flips, which I am also not about. Now, Adrian Buchman was very proud of me that I guessed that the Christopher Ward logo was representing a Swiss flag and an English flag.
Yep, absolutely.
And I love on the website, you have a plus that's twisted 90 degrees,
Yeah.
and it proudly says English Swissness. How important is this British/English identity, the DNA?
Very. It's what I think separates us from the herd in many ways. And we choose to describe ourselves as English as opposed to British. And some people, why would they understand the nuance of that? But some people do understand the nuance of it, because there's something I think a little more refined and genteel about Englishness. There's a definite sort of English style, which is distinctively different, in my view, to a Britishness and a British style. And I think if you take account of what we'd like to think we're pretty good at in this country of ours, I think we are pretty innovative. We're good designers. We're good risk takers, calculated risk takers. We're good. There's a good entrepreneurial spirit afoot in the UK. There always has been. You go back to the Industrial Revolution days, but I think that's re-emerged in the last 30 odd years in the UK. So there is a very unique set of things that add up to the Englishness level of the brand. But then you look at the other side of the brand, the Swiss side. We're talking here about watches. And so we're talking about precision instruments. We're talking about a degree of conservatism, rightly so, by the way, in terms of making sure that production and quality is catered for and looked after and nurtured. These two elements, when put together, we think create a really strong structure and give the brand and the business a sort of a foundation that is rare, because often you'll find, whilst many British brands source from Switzerland and their products are largely Swiss, they're presented only as British. And we didn't want that. If you're going to create truly merged business where everybody in it is valued equally, then you have to find a way of encapsulating that in everything you do and every single signal you send out. And that is why we developed the logo, because we wanted the most visible symbol of the business, both for the internal audience and moreover the external audience, to understand the equivalence of both sides of our business. And it is, I think, one of the unique parts of the Chris Ward brand, because I'm not aware of anybody else who has done that. Maybe they have.
As far as I know, they haven't. It's very interesting because I've been thinking and listening to what you've been explaining now. And while doing so, I got a ping from one of the Real Time Show Network members, actually an Englishman living in Holland.
Oh, right.
Also Red Bar Crew Amsterdam fan.
Right.
What does he send me? Alon, I'm getting my Christopher Ward ATOL 300 in within the hour. And I kid you not. He doesn't know we're recording, so
wow.
they're flowing to the Netherlands as well. And talking,
brilliant.
So that's lovely. So I can't wait to see during the next Red Bar meetup. We had at the previous Red Bar meetup the Bel Canto, which I had the honor already to play around with, hold it, admire it, and fall in love with it. Super original, and I'm referring back to what you said about the English being innovative in design. Now, the Bel Canto really was something new. Following with that flywheel that you guys activated, which you were referring at, the 12 created a lot of stirs. I'm quite positive it created a lot of sales because I know a lot of people ordering, but it also shook up the market and created a lot of criticism. Now, of which was, it looks like a Chapek Antarctic. Oh, it looks like the Tissot PRX. It looks like the Zenit Defy, and it looks like this and that and da. Now in Holland, and I've said this several times on air, we have a Dutch saying in the industry: a beautiful watch, which is translated, a beautiful watch is a sold watch. Okay, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But talking about originality, would you say the 12 is utterly original, or is it inspired by? And where do you put the foot down on when something is original or not?
Fair question. One that I think Ed Sheeran could probably answer as well as I. There has been a lot of comment. I think one of the reasons for the commentary, perhaps, is that Adrian Buchman, who designed the Antarctique, was also involved in the design of the 12, and Adrian joined us as our employee in 2015. And actually, we started work on the very first conversations we were having about an integrated sports watch were back in 2017, because as part of the great pantheon of luxury sports watches that have mostly graced the world stage since 1972, the first appearance of the Royal Oak. One of those was indeed our own C2 Lido, which we launched in 2013. People have forgotten that, I think, that we were into integrated bracelet watches back in 2013. But you're quite right. I mean, and we've been, and we always are, I hope, transparent and open about being inspired by Gerald Henter and the work that he did back in the 70s and beyond. But let's be clear. I mean, and I'm a huge fan of the Japek Antarctique, which I think they launched in 2020. But the Japek Antarctique almost certainly takes its references from the Royal Oak, the Nautilus, the Ingenieur, the 222, the Laureato, the Hublot Classic, the Rolex Oyster Quartz, the Bulgari Octo Finissimo, the Frederick Constein High Life, and on and on and on. There are certain tropes within that Henter created that are to do with that make up a integrated sports watch, and those tropes are very clearly the bezel design. The second trope is the dial, and the third trope is the integrated bracelet. Now, if you closely look at all of those watches that we have discussed, including the 12 and including the Antarctique, all of them play different tunes using the same chords. Yeah, everybody genuflects to the tropes that genius Henter evolved back in the 70s, but they play, if they do it well, and I think we've done it very well, the tune is different, even though the chords are the same. And so I think people maybe forget and aren't as familiar with the history of the dozens of various integrated bracelet watches that are out there, but we certainly are. And we have been influenced by the best of all of them, but mostly by Henter. And we understand the tropes, and the team here, I think, did a really substantially excellent job at finding a way to make them Christopher Ward's tropes. Yeah. And that's the real skill. Just as I think Japek did a fantastic job of making the Antarctique Japek's tropes, just as Bulgari did a fantastic job of the Octo Finissimo. You know what I mean? It's part of what the watch industry has always been about, and done well will always be about. So I'm delighted that people have recognised and seen what we've done. I think the bigger discussion that I've read online is well, if they've been quite astonished by the level of quality and the finishing that we've brought to the party at the sort of pricing that we've been able to bring it out at. And I think, maybe to some extent, some people are, and some brands who maybe worried, are a bit concerned, and their customers may be a bit concerned. What is the difference then? Why are you charging 20 times more or 15 times more or 8 times more for something that is not obviously 8 times, 15 times, 20 times better? That's an interesting debate to have.
That's definitely an interesting one to have. And I have zillion more questions for you. There's so much more ground to cover. So the episode with Adrian Brookman on the Real Time Show is episode 58. So we also go into this current discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So for our listeners, you can also go back and listen to that. Thank you, Mike, for being so honest and open. We could spend a whole episode on just the topic of design and of the philosophical discussion of originality of things.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It's lovely how you used the tropes, and I love the metaphor of using the same strings but different tunes. What I wanted to ask you, what do you do with that feedback? Do you guys actually listen to it? And how do you go about with consumer feedback?
I think you should always listen to feedback, constructive or otherwise. Obviously, the constructive feedback one gets is always valuable. We are obsessed with listening to our customers. Have been from day one. This is something that particularly Peter and I have always been in our past lives. I know it often gets said, and I'm not entirely sure in how believable it is in some instances, but I can honestly say, and look myself in the mirror when I'm shaving in the morning, that the customer is at the center of our business. So we listen to as much as we can. We're very fortunate, very lucky to have a couple of there's several social platforms devoted to Christopher Ward these days, but the very first one was set up in 2006, the Christopher Ward Forum, which today has thousands and thousands of members and is a completely editorially independent. And so that is a huge receptacle of information for us. But so is the Christopher Ward Enthusiast Group on Facebook. So are our Instagram accounts. So is Twitter, so is talking to people. My email address is on the website. I often spend half my weekends communicating with customers. So we are avid listeners of customers. And, they have had a huge influence on some of the products that we've brought out, some of the designs that we've done. Early criticisms years ago would be our loom wasn't good enough. You don't do enough sizes. Your dive watch is too thick. A good case in point would be the Trident Pro 300, which is our best-selling dive watch. And what we learned from working very closely with the forum, they gave us a list of things that they would really want included in their perfect dive watch. We went out to them and said, look, here's a questionnaire that we'd love you to fill in for us. And thousands of people filled it in. And so with their help and support, we created what we believe to be one of the best dive watches on the market, full stop. And definitely the best dive watch anywhere near the price point.
The gentleman is Miles that I was referring at. He ordered the Christopher Ward ATOL 300 in blue.
Yeah.
We are recording this literally a few days after you launched that.
Indeed.
A few feedback I've read, and I'm just voicing them. This is not my personal opinion. Is, they looked at Rolex. They looked at the Oyster Perpetual Stella-ish dials, and the bezel is a Yachtmaster by Rolex. Well, what would you answer these criticasters?
Well, I would go and ask them to look back at the history of our watches. We've been doing Fume dials for many years. The C60 Pro 600 also had a stainless steel bezel. So these have been around our collection for many years. I think we were one of the first people, and I think we actually beat Rolex to Fume dials. So, of course, when you are a major brand like Rolex and you're only a small fish like us, people's reference points are obviously going to be much more sunk into that which they see more often, i.e., the major brands. But if you take the time, it's like I say in terms of the debate and the discussion to be had about integrated bracelet watches. I don't see many people referring to the C2 Lido, and the fact that very unusually at that time, and this is a design trope that we've carried through from the C2 Lido, which was launched in 2013. The male end piece of the bracelet, very unusual. Mostly, that's just one significant difference to, say, the Antarctique. The male end piece, which we developed for the Lido, and we wanted to have a reference point to the Lido. So it's I think, and I completely understand it. Why would we expect people to be experts on the history of Christopher Ward when we've hardly surfaced without trace compared to the might of a brand like Rolex? But if people have the time and have the inclination to inform themselves, and I'm a great believer in action with insight, and if you do take the time to really delve into the design history of Christopher Ward, you'll see a progression, I hope, as we've got better and better. And the introduction of people like Adrian in 2015 was a huge stimulus to that. But we have always had an eye for these sorts of things. So it's worthy of people's time, I think, to have a look.
Mike, it's such a joy and pleasure to talk to you, and I really, really appreciate your openness and directness. And I need to end this on this now, but I don't want to, because I kind of wanted to discuss maybe the most important thing, that you are the co-founder of the British Watch and Clock Makers,
Alliance,
together
yes.
with Dr. Roger W. Smith, the apprentice of the famous George Daniels. And it's amazing work you've done, because I believe you've have already 80 members.
Yeah, we signed up our 80th member only yesterday.
So congratulations. So may I use this opportunity to invite both Roger and you to come on the Real Time Show another time, and we can just discuss that?
We would absolutely love to, Alon. I mean, with my other hat on, both Roger and I are passionate about how we can grow watchmaking on these shores. And so any opportunity we get to talk about what's really going on in the UK is gratefully accepted by us. So yes, I will speak to Roger, and whenever possible, we would love to come back and talk to you about the Alliance.
Fantastic. That will be an honor, because obviously Rob is British. I love British. Well, I said it, women and watches. We've covered many of them. So it will be a great honor for us and our listeners. Until that episode is going to air, please visit britishwatchmakers.com. Mike, I want to thank you so much for your time and openness. I really enjoyed this episode.
Likewise, Alon. I mean, it seemed to fly by. So, I really enjoyed it too. And it's great to talk to you. And thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you so much. And for our dear listeners, thank you for listening and giving us the feedback. If you have any questions, either for Mike France or Rob, David, or I, you can obviously always visit our website, therealtime.show. You can find Rob on Instagram at Rob Nuds, ROBNUDDS, or email him at rob@therealtimeshow. You can find me on Instagram at ALONBNJOSEPH, and email me alon@therealtimeshow. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and keep on ticking.